you know economics better than the average bear. And so I suppose one place where I want to start is we had more than 3 million people file for unemployment. What do you think when you hear that number? I guess is really where I want to start.
Well, I've been trying to think of a name for it, and I think probably the right name is it's a job pan depression, which is like this is like a job depression created by the pandemic. I mean, think about it. The most in our history in a single week had been 695,000 jobless claims in a week.
Yeah.
So when you think that record would be broken, you would think it would be 800,000, 900,000, not 3.28 million. It's almost 5 times the record, and it gets worse. It's likely undercounted. It's likely there were over 4 million people. So this is a pullback on our economy that is just unprecedented. It's in many ways worse than the Great Recession. The Great Recession had the fear of kind of global bank collapse. And so we don't see that type of fear now. But in terms of our job market, we've never seen a situation where so much economic activity is just being shut down. People are losing their jobs and they have no hope of finding other jobs. They're not even allowed to look for them. We all have people in our family who've been in the food industry. They work as waiters or waitresses or bartenders, or they're the assistant manager, or they work in the kitchen. When someone loses their job, at least one advantage is there's other restaurants to go to. There's other places to try. Here, it's just shut down. You're not even allowed to open it or go to one. And so we are, as a country, are going to have to deal with a degree of joblessness, at least for a few months, and I hope it's only for a few months, that we've never seen. And we're going to have to economically support people who are losing their jobs at no, help small businesses stay afloat who are being hurt at no fault of their own, because it's the right thing to do. It's the right economic thing to do. And if we don't do the social isolation, if we don't fix it, nothing will ever get better.
You sort of led into one of my next questions there. You said a couple of months, hopefully. The recession lasted, I don't know how many quarters, how many years, but optimistically, people think that we can just crank everything up and people might be going right back to work in 1 to 4 months, whatever. What sort of a whiplash could that have on the economy, and how fast could we get it moving again, do you think?
This is a pandemic. I mean, everything that's happening is because of the fact that we have to, as they say, flatten the curve. And the unfortunate or fortunate or just the truth is you have to do that. There is no economic recovery without flattening the curve. So when people say, well, what if we just went back to work and we just accepted that there would be, a bit more deaths in the United States? Well, one, I can't accept that view of human life, but even if you wanted to, it wouldn't work, because what's going to happen? Once people we're already seeing it, you start crowding the hospitals and overflowing. It's not just that old people with chronic conditions don't get the care. Nobody does. Somebody with a heart attack can't get into the emergency room. Well, when that happens, no matter what the rules are, everybody's going to stay home. Everybody's going to close their business. So, the sad thing is that we got off as a country to a very, very, very slow start on addressing the crisis. You need testing, you need the masks, you need the ventilators, you need the respirators, but boy, do you need the testing so and you can treat and you can isolate people. And so if you don't fix that health thing, there is no rushing the healthcare. So the real issue is making sure that as we open up again, we're not going to be one of those countries that was just solving it. Everybody got happy, went back too early, and then it all started, and then we had to shut down a second time.
So let's talk a little bit about that economic stimulus that's going through Congress right now. Do you think it's effective? And what do you think people at home, the average American, is going to see and feel from this?
It is not perfect, but it is an emergency, and it will help a lot of people, even with its flaws. I do believe this is the third, not the final. Bill, I am sure, I know we need to go back again in May, probably June, and add more. But here's what's in here, and a lot is going to depend on how well programs are executed and actually get to people. But let me mention three things that I think could be help to a lot of people watching. One, if you make under 75,000, you're going to get a check for $1,200. If you and your spouse uh, uh, a partner, that's 2,400, and you get $500 per child. So if you're hurting, there could be a $3,400 check on the way. That's going to help people a lot. It's not going to be enough for someone who's completely out of work and just struggling to pay the mortgage, et cetera, or the rent, or put food on the table, or pay the car bills. But it will help for them. Secondly, there is a small business provision, and people are going to have to, really look at this seriously. Find banks that are willing to put this as a top priority. Basically says you can borrow for up to 4.5 months the amount of your payroll and the amount of your rent and utilities. And if you use that money to keep your workers on the payroll, you do not have to pay back about half of it, about the first 8 weeks. So basically, a small business out there could borrow money for the next 2 months, keep all their workers on the payroll, and it wouldn't cost them a dime. They wouldn't have to pay back. But they're going to have to just go prove at a bank that they're being hurt by the virus, that they're in business, what their payroll is. So it's going to be worth doing for a lot of people uh, out there. And I'm hoping that our banking community will step up and make it easy and simple. And third is the unemployment relief. This was
Mhm.
really significant. And again, of course, it's going to be about execution. You're going to see these unemployment offices overwhelmed. We're going to need the federal government to be at the best, to be doing its best. But what's in there is whatever your ordinary unemployment would be. Let's say for some people it's just $200 or $300. They're going to add an extra $600. That means that for a whole lot of people, you're actually going to get 100% of the wages you would get if you were working. That will make a huge difference for the next few months for just millions of families. The second thing that's in there is they also said this would apply to people who are self-employed workers, gig workers, contractors. You may have to show that you've stopped working altogether or that you can't work, as opposed to just that you have less hours. So it's not perfect, but I want to let people know, if you are a gig worker, self-employed contractor, and you've thought you are not eligible for unemployment insurance, this bill does make you eligible. You might have to spend a little time, but there is real relief that could be very substantial. Those are the three best things in there. Where there's controversy is that there is a very big fund that will be used for different industries to do the Federal Reserve. There are a lot of Democrats like Elizabeth Warren, others, who are rightly concerned. Will there be the kind of strings and conditions that existed when we saved the auto company, where they got money, but it was, they had to go through bankruptcy, restructure their board. There were real tough conditions. People are worried about that, but I think a lot of people said, you know what, it's not perfect. I don't like that part, but we need to get this money out to real people right now. And so they voted for it with the idea we'll come back and fix some other things later.
What would you be telling one of the two presidents that you advised right now if you were going through this?
I would be telling them that the hard part is that this is going to be uh, about execution and getting things out fast and doing it well. And that, sometimes in normal policy, sometimes at the White House, you design the policy, you propose it, you pass the legislation, and then you move on. There are other times where the execution is everything. What we're seeing now is that there's been a complete failure of execution on the health crisis part, and it's going to cost us lives, and it's going to cost us months of economic recession. You'd have to say no more. The focus on making sure these small business loans actually get out, the focus on making these unemployment checks get out, has got to be a number one priority, because everybody who's hearing this good news from me is not going to feel it's good news if 6 weeks from now they're mired in red tape, worried about losing, a lot of their economic life and can't get the check. And I do think there will be mistakes and there will be some misspending and fraud. I mean, you have to accept that if you're going to do things incredibly fast, whether you're doing it as a military movement or getting money to people, it's not going to be perfect. But the thing that matters is to get the money out to the people who need it as fast as possible. Try to have as few mistakes as possible, but don't hold up the money for 95% of people, just to make sure you get that last 5% perfect. That's a hard thing to accept, but in a crisis, you have to accept that.
All right, my last question really that I had prepared, are you just hopeful or are you optimistic?
I'm worried. I mean, I feel that what is happening in this bill is important for helping people, but and it may mean that the deep recession we have is a little less deep. But as long as you have this crisis, as long as you have this exponential growth of cases that will lead to exponential growth of deaths and exponential demands on hospitals, you can't you can't solve this. You cannot solve this economically. This is just a cushion. So we've got to solve the healthcare crisis, and that's our number one. So I am worried, but I can't tell people that this is what we call in economics a quick V recession, which is, you go down and then you come up fast. You want to just get things. You want to keep things afloat, keep as many small businesses keeping their lights on, keep as many people in their jobs and their home. And that will put you in a better position when we start getting control of the spread to get people back and maybe not have the same degree of devastation. One of the problems in the financial crisis was the economy did get better and it did come out of recession pretty quick, but a lot of people they were just ruined. They lost their whole housing values. They lost everything. So we want to keep as many small businesses afloat, as many people afloat. So we're in a position that at least we can start doing what maybe you call kind of a U-shaped, where people can start to get better, get up, and there hasn't been as much damage. But we need that health response. I hear your governor on TV. I know she's focused on it. I know the governors are, and I know there's a lot of businesses, trying to step up. Heck, you and I, we're from Michigan. We're from the arsenal of democracy. I mean, we saw factories that used to build cars not build a car for 4 years so that they could build the planes that helped us win World War II. It's hard to believe we as a country can't mobilize that same amount to get some tests and respirators and ventilators and masks out there. I'm just hopeful that in the greatness of the country, we will figure it out. But boy, this slow start for 2 or 3 months is going to be tragic. Unfortunately, I think in terms of the human cost and the economic cost.
Well, thankfully, we're doing stories every day on local businesses that are doing things. I did one just yesterday in a company that they can't make ventilators, but they're making ventilator parts. So it seems like my mom's up in the UP right now sewing masks. So, I mean,
No, I mean,
doing everything we can.
that's what you just have to believe in, that there is just this greatness in the American spirit. And even if there are mistakes in our government or sometimes, but whatever has happened in the past, and I think it's been pretty terrible the last 2 or 3 months, we got to go forward. We just got to do the best we can, not make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, we always do go forward. Well, Mr. Sperling, I appreciate the time.